Today we're going to be going over SuiteScript 2.0 as part of NetSuite. Now this tutorial is going to be really technical, so it's going to involve it's going to be basically all about SuiteScript and how to customize NetSuite instance and how to add features and remove features using SuiteScript. SuiteScript is very powerful. You can do a lot, basically everything in NetSuite or almost everything in NetSuite, because it gives you all the different features and all the different access point for your logic or your business logic to go into NetSuite and do whatever you need. Now, this is not going to be an advanced SuiteScript, so this might be complicated for those of you who are not technical. But if you do know JavaScript, because SuiteScript is basically based around JavaScript, you're going to be able to follow along easily, I hope. Later on, we're going to be doing another series of videos, hopefully for a more advanced SuiteScript and what more advanced features we can do around SuiteScript. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas or any suggestions of certain series you want to go over. All right, so let's get going here with SuiteScript 2.0. This is, again, more of an intro. So SuiteScript is really based around JavaScript. It is an API that NetSuite or Oracle NetSuite provided for us to be able to interact with the instance of NetSuite. There are certain things within NetSuite like workflows and certain customization that you can do through the UI, for sure. You can do a lot of things like that. And definitely you can see NetSuite trying to move more to low code or no code type of features so that users can right away start customizing without having to write any code. But there's always that certain logic that you cannot execute using workflows or any type of UI builder. And you're going to have to end up rolling up your sleeves and writing in some code. And this is what we're going to be covering with SuiteScript. So if you have knowledge on JavaScript and you've actually worked with JavaScript before, this is going to be a lot easier for you. SuiteScript 2.0, and this is what we're going to be focusing on in this instance or in this video, it is organized into modules as opposite of 1.0. So 2.0 is organized into modules, so this way you can actually import only the modules that you require in your script or in your logic. This makes your code a lot lighter and makes basically your interaction or the user experience faster because you only load the certain features or the functionalities that you need within that certain module. There's a more advanced topic, again, that we can talk about in a different series, which is going to be how to create your own modules. But in this case, and in most cases, what I've seen from experience with NetSuite, I think 90% or 95% of the time, you don't need to create your own modules unless you're creating something, a very complex app. All right. So SuiteScript 1.0 is deprecated. So I wouldn't really waste any time with SuiteScript 1.0. This is it was a long time ago being used, and I see, in my opinion, I prefer 2.0 a lot more. And either way, you don't want to write any code in 1.0 and then having to reformat or refactor it into 2.0. That's going to waste a lot of your time. I've seen a lot of people who want to get into SuiteScript and basically into scripting within NetSuite, and they all said, like, I want to start learning from 1.0 and then graduate into learning 2.0. My suggestion is don't waste your time. Just go right away into 2.0, and you should learn because it's a different methodology and it's a different way of structuring your code. If you learn 1.0, you're going to be stuck on 1.0, and then you're going to have to rewire your brain to write it in 2.0. And I've actually seen a lot of consultants and technical people who used to write 1.0 a lot. And when 2.0 was introduced, they got very confused and they actually never learned it. Not that you might not, but I'm just saying that just don't waste your time on 1.0 and just jump right away into 2.0. All right. Third thing is very important for you is going to be the documentation. I'm going to show you towards the end of this video about where to get the documentation. NetSuite provides a lot of documentation, which is going to look a little bit intimidating for people who don't know Suite scripting. But after a while, once you actually start doing some logic, you'll be very comfortable with that. I will link also in this video the PDF for SuiteScript, but you should be comfortable with it. It's a very long document, but you can always search within the document just to jump into the sections that you want to look into. And throughout this series, we're going to be looking at this documentation, hopefully for you to learn how to use that documentation and how you can find the necessary information to help you. All right, so let's jump right into it, and enough with the introductions and understanding of all of this. Let's jump into some concepts. And this is going to be one of the few videos with actual slides. Later on, we're going to be jumping right into code. So let's talk a little bit about the different script types. And these script types are really important to understand because they're going to help you in architecting your software, architecting the different methodologies or the different concepts that you want to do. So in SuiteScript, they have the concept of script types and then certain events. So there is a client-side script, for example. There's a user event script, there is scheduled script, there's SuiteLit script, and there's RESTlet script. So there's a lot of different ones, and these are not the only ones, but there's others. There's MapReduce, there's a bunch of other different types of scripts. In this case, however, most of what people use when they're talking about SuiteScript is going to be about either client-side script or a user event script. So these two scripts are also I've seen like maybe 70 to 80% of different scripts. 70 to 80% of customizations require one of these two, or maybe a combination of both. Then the more specialized cases, you'll need the other type of scripts. But you'll know when you need other types. All right, so client-side script, what's the difference really between these scripts? So each of these scripts is actually written in its own file. You cannot have one file or one code that has two different types of scripts. So each script will have its own type. So if I write a client-side script, I'm going to have to write it separately, but I can still interact between these two. So the client-side script can, in theory, call a different script. So for example, I can have a client-side script that would call a scheduled script in the background, or a RESTlet that would call a user event script, or anything like that. Well, not really, maybe the other way around. So a user event script would call a RESTlet. You can interact between these two scripts, but they're going to be written in separate files. All right. So what is the difference between the client-side script and the user event for now? So the client side, if you see in this little diagram that I made here, when the user is interacting with NetSuite, they're actually interacting on their computer, on their local machine. They're not interacting with NetSuite yet. So this is where the browser or the user computer is. Okay. So any client-side script is actually getting executed on the computer. And then the user event script and actually every other type of script other than the client-side script is all executed on the NetSuite server, right? So if you have a certain, let's say that you want to show a pop-up on the screen, right? This is a client-side script because you need to show this pop-up on the client side, on the browser. So this has to be executed as a client-side script. However, if you want to do certain operations within the server, so for example, you want to create a purchase order, and then that purchase order will also create something else, maybe a different, let's say an email or something like that. You can run it through a user event script. Okay, you can in theory still do it through client side, but you get the concept. There are certain things that will have to happen in the user event script. Okay, and the documentation will show you each module if it runs on the user event or if it runs on the client side. Okay, or runs on the server or the client side. Now, each of these scripts also has a different event, right? So, and I know this might be confusing, but bear with me, and you, with the examples later, you're going to start understanding. So the client-side script, for example, it has here certain types, right? So we have we have a field change event. So the field change event is think of it as an event emitter, right? You write certain logic inside the client-side script as a type, and you're saying when the field changes, then that's my event, fire this logic or start this or execute this logic, right? you can have a different event, which is called a page init. So as soon as you load a page, then, execute this block of code. Whenever the save record is pressed, the button of save record, then execute this logic. And you actually have a lot of different types here. I think you have around 7 different events under the client-side script. Now, the same happens here with the user event script. Remember, the user event script is being executed on the server. So on the user event, you have 3 different events. Opposite to the client side, even though the client side we have almost 7, on the user event script, we actually have only 3. And these are the only 3 that you have. You have before load, you have before submit, and you have after submit. Now remember, the user event script always gets executed on the server. So the operation that this goes in is that before load, so when the user, let's say, opens a purchase order page, or they open a vendor page. So as soon as the user opens this page, the before load block of code, whatever it is, if you have it, it will be executed right away before the user even gets the page yet, right? So you could have some certain logic on the server. You say, before you even send back this page, do this block of code, okay? And then you have before submit, which is also a different type, but this is once the user submits the code, the page. So if the user says, save, close, or cancel, whatever the different types of submit, and submit doesn't always have to be save, it could be any other type. Then you would execute this logic. And then you have after submit, which is also going to be executed on the server, but it will be after the save. Okay, so let's talk about what's the difference really? What's before load, or why would you use before load, before submit, and after submit? So before load, remember, it happens on the server before you even get the page. So before load always gets used, for example, when you want to customize the page. So for example, you want to add a certain button on the page, you would use before load. So you're telling the server, execute this block of code, add in the button, for example, and then send to the user the block of code, or the layout, or the page, so that the page would have the button right away built in. Okay. When would you use before submit, for example? So before submit, it still runs on the server. It's not running on the browser. You send all the information to the server, and then the server would run this code before it hits the database. So for example, you save a new purchase order, right? So before submit, what you could do here is you could actually do some validation, for example. So you're saying before you even save this information into the server, into the database, run this block of code. So you can say, check if that product quantity exists in whatever the item quantity exists, and then if not, then do certain operation, right? And then you would save the record, right? After submit would happen after the information is saved in the database. So for example, let's say again, I save a purchase order, or let's say I save a sales order, right? So if I save a sales order and then it gets saved into the database, then the after submit would fire and it will be executed. So the after submit would happen after you hit the database. And this would, after you hit the database, you can do certain logic. So for example, after I save a sales order, I want to then notify the customer that the sales order has been created. So you don't want to notify the customer before submit, because then what happens if something goes wrong and it doesn't actually save, right? But then you would do after submit, which means after everything is saved, then the after submit would execute and it would, for example, email the customer. All right. So again, I would say a majority of your code is going to be within these client-side script and user event script. Now the others don't really have we don't have event emitters in general, because they're very specific. So scheduled scripts, for example, you would give it a schedule and it will execute the whole block whenever the schedule hits, right? And then SuiteLit and RESTlet would, RESTlet, for example, would happen if you're familiar with the REST kind of interaction, or the HTTP requests. Then you'll be able to do GET requests, POST requests, PUT and DELETE requests, which would execute. So all of these are actually don't have any events. Only these 2 have events, and the client-side script is the only one that is executing on the browser. All right. So make sure that you understand these, and this might be a lot of information. So we will look into the remainder in the next video. We'll look into the documentation, how we can find more information.